Welcome to The Truth in This Art. I am your host, Rob Lee. Thank you for joining me for my conversations bridging arts, culture, and community. Today, I've got a special guest making his second appearance just in time for Culinary Arts Month. He is the co-founder of a restaurant group born of an oyster farm. With his partners, Nick and Patrick, they created True Chesapeake Oyster Co, Maryland's first oyster farm with a fine dining restaurant in Baltimore. Please welcome Chef Zach Mills. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me back, man. It's really good to see you.
Good to see you as well. I mean, it's, I think I've been to, the restaurant more times. I've had more of your oysters, right, than any other place. And here's the thing. I got to shout out another chef, a friend of ours, Chris, Amendola or whatever, right?
Yep.
He had to teach me how to eat an oyster.
Did he really?
Yes, he did.
Okay. All right.
We were at the bar and I was like, I don't know how to do this. He was like, all right, this is how you do it. Just really quick demo. And I was like, you know what? I like chefs. It's like I learned something today. So now I go to your place with this Amendola knowledge. It's like, yeah, let me knock this back real quick.
Awesome. Well, that's kind of part of what our job is, right? Not only are we supposed to feed people, but we should be, the first ones in line to help people, whether it's, with a recipe that people are struggling with, or, if they haven't eaten an oyster or haven't shucked an oyster or anything else, we are educators on top of kind of everything else that we do.
And it is everything else that you guys do. So, it's been about 3 years since we last talked on the pod.
Yeah, it was like late mid-ish pandemic kind of craziness.
Yes. So before we get into like the deeper questions, I do this a little different in the intro. I want to give you the space to introduce yourself and share one of your favorite food memories.
Cool. Well, my name's Zach Mills. I'm the chef and one of the owners of True Chesapeake Oyster Company. And fondest food memories. Man, there's just so many. I'm lucky enough that I grew up in a very food-centric family. So just holidays with just massive, I mean, my dad's one of 8. And then my mom is one of 4. So, just family everywhere all the time, food cooking all the time. I'm fortunate enough that my grandmother on my father's side is first generation Italian American. And my fondest memories are her like making fresh pasta when I was little and could still kind of like peer above the counter. And she was one of those ones, like she wouldn't spoon you if you got in there and, tried to grab something early. So, but just like my memories of just like fresh food cooking throughout my childhood and just surrounded by just loving family and people talking about food early on in my life really kind of like set the tone for what ended up becoming my career.
It's wonderful. It's wonderful to be around sort of like, your family members and you have these sort of memories that are there. And, I think now, obviously, I'm sure you've had these conversations over the last few years with, The Bear being a TV show and all of that stuff. And I think of the spoon episode, who throws the fork or what have you. I think of that, the holiday episode, and it clicks so well. And it captures all of those families. There's like one person's really in there getting it, making everything. And then everyone else is doing all of their 1,000 things. And, when I think of food, when I think of chefs, it's not a solo journey. It's definitely, it's a family component. And there was a fork in the road. Like there's been many as far as what creative thing I was going to do, what artistic thing I was going to do. And chef was in there briefly. I get joked about, like, there's a few folks around and like, Rob's a food snob, so don't half-ass it. He's a purist.
That's awesome. But you're absolutely right. It's just, and it's one of those things that it takes a village just to kind of bring you up in this industry, not only from family support, but then, who you came up through from the people that taught you how to do this. And it starts early and it's one of those things. And yeah, no, you being in my restaurant, it's always one of those things. I'm like, shit, I hope he likes everything.
That's great. It's great.
It's like people who report on food and no food, as well as like industry folk. Those are the people that, like, when they come into the restaurant, I sweat a little extra because I'm like, God, I hope everything's right. Like I'm going around, I'm like double checking, I'm tasting everything. I'm like, okay, I think we're good here. But it's definitely one of those things, like especially anytime, you or any good reporter who's done their homework, or just the chefs and other people. I get so extra nervous because it's like you're cooking for the people who know, and you're cooking for the people who care, and those are the people that you really like. It's proud to have them in the restaurant. So.
It's wonderful. It's so true. And I try whenever I go to these places because of doing this and just having food opinions. And I really like the things that I like. And it's one of those things where I'm not going to make a fuss. I don't need my ass kissed or anything along those lines. But it's just like, okay, I'm here and I want to support. And I'm the master of. I will go to a place that only does liquor, and I'll come out with like a $200, $300 bill and just like, look, man, I'm just trying what's on the menu. That's just what it is.
Absolutely. 100%. No, if I go to a place, I'm that guy who's like, all right, how do I pull off ordering damn near everything on this menu? Even if it's like, me and two other people, it's like, all right, we're going for it. Like, let's just, let's really give it a go here.
100%. So in this time, over the last, number of years, what have you, as you mentioned earlier, this was one of the pandemic pods, if you will, episodes that we did. And I know that the sort of like food and the service industry, that's been, it's been an interesting, 5 years for you all. So could you share some of the more recent developments or sort of how things are going? Could you just give us sort of like, what has the last 3 to 4 years been like for True Chesapeake?
Mayhem, if I had to sum it up in one word. Um, it was one of those things that we opened at such a crazy time, being 4 months before everything really hit the fan. So to go from the first 2.5, 3 years of opening this restaurant and just trying to survive and just doing whatever we can to like make it happen, not lose money hand over fist. And then to kind of, restaurants are still digging out to this day. There's no question about it. The government was nice enough to do that restaurant revitalization thing, but I think like less than 20% of restaurants actually got it, and we did not. So we had to keep grinding. And to still, first and foremost, to still be here and know that my restaurant will turn 5 years old in October is one of those things that like my partner and I like really like we give each other a hug every now and then and are like, holy crap, we're still here. And to start to see the light at the end of the tunnel, as far as, it seems to be coming around finally. And I think this year has been the year so far that, at least from a business standpoint, this April, May, June is always a huge 3 months in the restaurant industry, because you've got your holidays like your Mother's Day and your Father's Day, but you've got your graduations, college, high school, all that stuff, Preakness. This was the first year that it kind of felt like it used to.
Yeah.
And really, like, people are coming out in droves and celebrating and doing all the things. And that's really just a really cool feeling to like be able to kind of feel the, most chefs know their flow. And I've been doing this for a bunch of years before opening this restaurant. So, and I've been doing it in Baltimore. So I kind of knew, all right, come April 1, put our heads down, get through to 4th of July. Then we'll slow down a little bit. We'll, get the summer menu out. We'll have some fun, and then, gear up until we get into the fall, and then, go nuts again, November, December, holiday parties, all that stuff. And that cycle was so off for so many years, because like all of a sudden summer was the busiest month because like people were outside and they didn't want to eat inside and this and that. So it's nice to kind of feel like we've got the flow again, and just to see more guests in the restaurant and everything else. So, we're just blessed and thankful that we're still here cooking food and making drinks and being in the hospitality industry for all these people. We're thankful we got through it, because a lot of like dear friends did not. And, it's one of those things, like, it wasn't for lack of talent. It wasn't for lack of effort. It wasn't for anything. It was just this restaurant industry on the best of times is a stupid way to make money. It is. And most of us know it, and because we're all crazy people, we do with this because we love it. But it never makes an owner a ton of money, especially if you're a one-off little restaurant like myself. And it's always like these margins of 2-3 percentage points here and there that you got to move around to make you truly profitable. So the fact that we're still here, we're just thankful, and it's rejuvenating to see kind of the industry coming back. And I was with our friend Chris a couple of times doing charity events in the last couple of months, and we just kind of had these grins on our face, like, all right, we're doing it, like we're back to this. We're exhausted all the time. We're doing, 3 charity events next week. We're doing a private dinner this, we're doing that, how's this, how's that? And, getting back at that and talking shop with everybody. And, it's a nice time to be here. It's exhausting all the time. And it's just so much more helpful when you look out to a full dining room with happy people, like hanging out and eating your food. It's still one of those things to this day that, like, I almost have to pinch myself a little bit. I'm like, people come here to eat this. I put this on a plate. You want to eat it? That's pretty cool. So that's kind of like, I think that sums up the last couple of years of my life, is just, grinding and getting through it, and, starting to see that light that, like, okay, we're here, we're making it, we're okay. And, I can keep cooking in this beautiful place. And, that's something that, we're every chef should be thankful for every day we're in a restaurant, because the restaurant industry is such a finicky situation that, every day I get to walk into a place I call my own and cook my own food. I'm blessed, and I'm always going to be thankful for that.
That's wonderful. I'm glad to hear that. Because, I go to these places. I like the places, and, for me, I'm all right at cooking. Actually, I have some food going right now as we're talking, at the little dinner going,
Nice.
little meal prep going. And when I find a place that, such as your place, such as many places that are in Baltimore, because, Baltimore is one of those, like, sort of food cities that I don't think get us enough credit for being a food city. Um,
100%.
and, when I find a place that I like, and it's not like I go here for this specific plate, for specific item or specific meal, it's just like, oh, I can find something new that I like. I now have almost a passport to try different things. So it's like, I have my default thing. If all else fails, this is here. But then it's like, okay, I trust the chef. I trust how they go about their stuff. I trust sort of the culinary language there, the ethos, and I'm going to try this other thing. And there's that trust there. And that's the thing that I get from you and I get from Amendola. So I really dig that. And I'm glad to see that there's that, and hear that there's that light at the end of the tunnel. So this next question, I want to hear a bit about, like, ingredients, right? Like, True Chesapeake, known for that commitment to the local stuff. I remember it was snakeheads back, a couple of years back, or have you? Remember that was the thing?
100%.
So how does that sort of process go, whether it be sort of partnerships, whether it be sort of like, who are you going to, like, who are the suppliers, who are the farmers? What's the process of, like, sourcing those high quality ingredients?
Yeah. So it's one of those things that each season, I think chefs such as myself and Chris and a lot of others in this town are kind of stalking the local farm availability lists, first and foremost. So, and we're always in constant communication with them, like, what's next, how many weeks out on this. Like right now, we're getting a heads up that tomato season's starting early, which is like the greatest thing to me ever, because I think an out of season tomato is a travesty against nature. But an in season Maryland tomato is one of the greatest things that could grow in the ground. So that's how it starts for sure. And we know, the ones of us who have been in the industry long enough, we've got kind of a seasonal ticker in our head, and we're like, all right, well, we're hitting this day. So, all right. So, ramp should be popping up right about now. And we'll probably have, a week or two window for that. And, make sure we buy all those up, and because before they go away. And, But yeah, it's really just checking the lists, talking to our local farmers, figuring out what's going to be available. There is kind of a one group on the West Coast that gets product in a little early, so I can kind of like cheat and get my recipe testing done at least
Sure.
before the stuff kind of pops up through the local farms and everything else. But when it comes down to it, it's always for me, it's always produce driven, the menu, regardless of being a seafood centric restaurant, but regardless of the fact that we have our own oyster farm. For me, it's just what produce is coming out and what's speaking to me right now, and what can I put together that's neat, and different, or something that somebody hasn't had before, or what's a classic combination of things that I can put together in a different way and make it look pretty on a plate, but still taste delicious. And so it's really a combination of all those things. And usually with me, it always starts with the produce, and I sit there and just write down, in a notebook, like, all right, here's what I want to work with in the next month, 2 months of my life. Here's the produce that I want to work with. Now, where does it fit into the menu? And what did I not highlight last year as much as I want to this year? And, because there's, especially when you get into spring, which is such a fleeting time in this state,
Yeah.
that, my spring menu came out, like a month ago, and summer menu's written now. And I've got about 3 weeks until that's got to hit. So it's such a sprint through this time period that I really just need to like keep writing. And that's what I do. And I literally sit there, and the thing is, I'm writing dishes 1 to 2 seasons out ahead of time, and then I'll kind of tweak them based on what produce is coming in, what farmers are talking about, anything that they're excited about, anything different that people haven't been using, which is kind of few and far between these days, but it does happen. And yeah, it's really just it's always going to be what is growing in Maryland is always going to kind of like charge my creative brain and make me kind of want to move forward.
Thank you. And I have a follow-up question around menus. I'm definitely going to return to that after this question, because you mentioned something about sort of I took it as the testing component, right? Of like, all right, what's going to make it. Tell me about that process. I'm very curious about that. Is it one of those things where it's like, look, I've had a lot of ramps. Is this going to finally make the menu? What are we doing here? The ramps aren't quite right. Tell me about that process. And when you're developing what ultimately is going to be on the menu or what have you.
Yeah. So I probably write twice as many dishes as ever hits a menu in a season.
Sure.
And it's really just from that component, it's really just things that pop into my head. And it's hard to explain when, because I mean, it could be something as stupid as me like watching a nature show or something like that. And then all of a sudden I just see like a color scheme or this or that, and that kind of jogs my brain. Or watching cooking shows. I'm still one of those nerds that like I watch Top Chef.
Oh yeah.
One of my mentors has been on Tournament of Champions for 2 years running. So I'm watching the TV and like throwing things at it like I'm watching a football game when I'm watching him on there. But like we're fortunate enough these days that there's a lot of cool media out there, both in the social media world or on TV or podcasts such as yourself, where people are talking about food. And that's just one of those cool things that like it makes my job almost a little easier, because like I'll hear about a technique and be like, gotta try that, or just see something neat or goofy on a quick fire on Top Chef or something like that, where I'm like, and then I'll pull my phone up and get my Evernote app and be like, all right, this and this. And so then when it comes to testing, it's like you've got all these great ideas. And I always have a little section of nobody will order this. and that's like the chefy section. So like I always have a list of things where I'm like, this would be cool. I don't think anyone's going to order it, but I got to get it out of my head. Yep. So like that's when the testing starts, and I'll start, tasting it or give it to I'm fortunate enough that my business partner, Patrick, who runs the business as well as helps me run the front of house. he's got like that palate that like he doesn't like weird stuff. So I'm always like, try this. He's like, what's in it? I'm like, it doesn't matter. Just eat it and you let me know what you think. And that's kind of a nice way to like test things and be like, yo, hey, okay, we can give this a go, or this won't work, or
Yeah.
and you know, yeah, there's things in my head that I think are going to turn out awesome, and then I played them like, wow, that doesn't work at all. Like, I mean, I've definitely had dishes where like super technical and like, oh, we're going to Napoleon style this, and it's going to go straight up, and then you try to do it, and it's like hanging out like this, and or like just like you know, the consistency of a soup or a sauce or a puree, or just kind of how the plate looks visually compared to what it was in my head. And there's definitely things that never hit the menu simply because I tested and I'm like, oh, that just doesn't work. It just like it didn't work. Like that this isn't good. And but then there's other things where I'm like, this probably won't work, and then I put it on a plate. Like right now, I've got a it's probably the last week of it, but I've got a stinging nettle and ramp soup.
Yeah.
So I wanted to make a nettle soup, and
Yeah.
I was like, no one's gonna order this, but it's neat, so I'm gonna do it anyway. And I actually did. We got a review not too long ago, and the review simply said anybody that puts ramp and nettle soup on the menu is my kind of person, and I'm coming back just because of this. So that was really like I was like, all right, sweet, that's pretty cool. So yeah, it's little things like that that like make it all worth it too. It's all the mad scientist part of this
Yeah.
is the fun part. Like chefs don't get to play with food nearly as much as people think we do because we're like doing everything else, making sure everybody shows up on time, making sure everybody's trained, making sure that, you know, payroll's done, like, or foods are ordered, like all this stuff. There's so much admin to what we do that,
Yeah.
like, when I actually get to like play with food, people look around the corner, they're like, look, he's smiling. Like, because I'm like sitting there, I'm like, this is awesome. Like, I'm just, you know, making a mess and having some fun and really that part of the thing and testing and tasting and being your own biggest critic is really like that's the fun part. Like that
Yeah.
the and even if something doesn't hit the menu, you know, I'll take a note and say like, well, this didn't work because of this and this and this. So next season, let's look back at your notes and say, okay, well, why did this work and what tweaks can we do? And then next thing you know, a dish evolves from there. And that's kind of the fun of it too, is like, you know, evolution of food. I think a lot of chefs can say that like when we've been cooking for long enough, there's food from 5, 6, 7 years ago that I can go back through my Instagram and be like, well, that was a neat plate. Well, what can I do differently? Like to like update it or evolve it into what I am as a cook today.
Yeah.
And a lot of those are kind of, you know, that's a lot of fun too. So
So there's two. The one I want to make a comment. I am a food nerd as well. I watch a lot of cooking shows and I have casual conversations in the day job. I was talking with a coworker about forbidden rice, and I was like, man, I can do like, you know, maybe a black rice, maybe with black beans, maybe with garbanzo, do this black and white thing. She's like, what's forbidden rice? She's like, yo, that's black. And I was like, look, man, it's the colors, man. And the other thing I want to comment on, it was more of a question. So recently, I have one thing that's a little further back and one thing that's more recent. I have a smoker and I ended up smoking some garlic, and I was like, I'm gonna make a mayo with this. I'm gonna make like a smoked garlic mayo, and I failed abysmally. It was terrible. It did not work, and it reminded me of that time when I tried to make. I love beer battered fish. I tried to make like beer battered fish, and I was just like, all right, got the right fish, did all of that, did the research, did not work out. I'm terrible at frying food. And I remember my brother was there and he watched me fail. He's like, yo, you kind of threw all that away. Didn't really work out. So both of those are crime alley things for me. If you follow your Batman, I need to return to those and maybe they'll be together somehow. Do you have a sort of crime alley dish for you that you're like, I really wanted this on there. It didn't work for whatever reason. And, you know, it was maybe something you revisited and you got it, or, you know, something that's still TBA.
that's a good question. Yeah, I did. Wow, what was that one? Okay, so I'm a big soup guy, so I'm always making sure that there's like at least one neat soup on the menu. Yeah, I did a like spring garlic soup a couple years ago. It was actually two different spring soups I've done that have they weren't epic failures, but they just weren't great. And it was a spring garlic soup that just it turned out too brothy but still too garlicky, and I was having real trouble balancing it. And I wanted to do like a grilled shrimp skewer on the thing, and it really like it looked neat,
Yeah.
but then you tried to eat it, and you're like, nope, nope, that doesn't work at all. Like that just doesn't even taste good. And then same deal, I did a soup that actually hit the menu, I don't know, 2, 3 years ago, and it was a play on potato leek soup, but it was potato ramp.
Mm.
And I was like, this should work. Potato leek, potato ramp, same deal. And I'm not gonna lie, I really dug it, and the guests did not. And it was one of those ones where like that's where the nettle ramp kind of started to form in, because I was like, all right, well, I need to balance this a little better, and this and that. And I was, I was kind of proud of that soup. So that was kind of a kick in the pants when people didn't dig it. But it is what it is. Like I'm cooking for other people, not myself. So yeah, those are two ones that kind of stuck in the back of my head that then kind of combined into the one that actually worked this year.
Yeah.
So that's kind of cool that it actually kind of like it did evolve into something. And I'm sure there's way worse epic failures that I've probably blocked out of my head. I spent 5 years as the head chef downtown at Wit and Wisdom, and I had a celebrity boss, Michael Mina, and then his two corporate chefs who are dear friends and mentors of mine, one of whom is the one that goes on Tournament Champions these days. And my hardest thing was when they would show up each season and eat my food. And that was always terrifying because they already saw everything. Like I had to get everything approved. I had to send Michael recipes. I had to send him pictures. I had to send him costing before anything could hit the menu.
Yeah.
And in order for my food to hit the menu, I had to make sure it was the best gave him the best stuff, my best stuff. And, every now and then he or my corporate chefs would come in and taste something and be like,
that ain't it.
This ain't it. Here's like, all right, here's what we do to this. And,
Yeah.
it was a great learning experience, but also a very humbling thing when like, these guys with Michelin stars and James Beard Awards are like, yeah, you thought you had it, but you don't have it. But at the same time, it was always a great learning experience. But yeah, it's this business always finds a way to humble you in some way, shape, or form. And the epic failures will always come out. And I think the longer I do it, my batting average has definitely gone up, 100% gone up. I mean, when I was a young, 30-something head chef, my batting average was pretty low there for a minute, but eventually that's all you can do. Failures is where what you learn from and what you come from. And it's just like cooking for a living in general. I tell all the cooks, it's like, you don't learn from the easy services. You get better from the really hard services where you get your butt kicked. It's just like that age old saying of like, the test of character is not when things are going easy, it's when things are going poorly. So it's the same deal in cooking or anything else. It's like, when you don't got it, learn from it. And, if we're being our own biggest critic, then, we should be in pretty good shape. Because if I think something sucks, I'm not going to send it out. So if my level is super high, then we should be in good shape. I mean, I've had dishes in the past where I put it on the menu, I'm 50-50 about it, and then guests really dig it. And you're like, all right, well, they dig it. So, I'll still see what I can do to make me a little happier with it. But at the same time, like sometimes there's things that I'm almost a little too hard on myself these days. And I think a lot of us are.
It's about the reps. It's, using the batting average thing, getting those swings in. And, when I do the sort of education piece, I do that now. And, I come in with a lot of experience in doing this. I don't know if it's good per se, but I've been doing it for a long time. So it's the reps. That's the thing I always say. Like I may have like a terrible interview. It's like, wow, I did not ask a good question there, but eventually I'm going to get one that just crushes it. But it's just keep swinging, keep taking those at bats, if you will.
100%.
So I got two more real questions. I definitely got those rapid fire ones I want to hit you with, but the next one goes a little bit like this. So it kind of touched on going back to menu. So in this sort of let's focus in True Chesapeake specifically. Is there a specific menu item? It can be like, look, this is not even a full dish. This is a part of a dish. This is a component. This is a technique that I apply that's on the menu or a menu in itself. But what sticks out if you were to say, this is True Chesapeake, this is Zach Mills right here? What is that one item, menu or item on menu that comes to mind for you?
Yeah, that's a good question. The one thing that opening this restaurant, tying it to the fact that we started as an oyster farm that I was a huge fan of before I even came on board, really helped me kind of like focus in early on like, okay, we want something for everybody on the menu, but we were an oyster farm. We were born from an oyster farm. We have an oyster farm. We have the freshest oysters coming up multiple times a week. Half the time they've only been out of the water for a couple hours when we get them. So that really, to me, was what kind of focused me first on making sure that I'm telling the right story
Sure.
of the restaurant. And so I guess it's really, I would say, it's a twofold, and two dishes that I put on the menu that I didn't necessarily think would become staples that ended up becoming staples. One was the French onion roasted oysters. So like super dumb idea. Like I like French onion soup. I like oysters. I think we can basically top the oysters with French onion soup, and like Gruyere cheese and oysters and cheese are a thing. So and then we tasted it, and I have really like good French onion soup base in my back pocket. So I was like, all right, I'll just make my French onion soup because I know it's really good, and then we'll go that. And that turned out, I mean, I'm again, I'm my own biggest critic, but that one turned out to be pretty darn good, and people dug it to the point where like I was then like, okay, well that's kind of a cold weather dish, but everyone was like, no, you're not allowed to take that off the menu ever. So that was one of those things that stuck out to me that is still to this day is on the menu, and people really dig it. And because we've got our a lot of places do cheese and Old Bay on oysters. A lot of places do Rockefeller and things that we do already, but I wanted to make sure that we had something that kind of speaks to my kind of French training coming up in addition to making sure that we're showcasing our oysters. And then we do a steak tartare with a smoked oyster aioli where we're taking our oysters and we're smoking them, and then making a sauce for the steak tartare, and then plating the steak tartare in an oyster shell to kind of showcase where part of that steak is coming from the ocean, and then topping with caviar just because I wanted it to be a little fancy. But like those are kind of the two things that I think, for me, I always want a little like, I guess whimsy is the word. I mean, look at me, I'm not a whimsical guy, but like, like I like to like play with food, and I like it. I like some levity to the situation, and I like people to see like dumb ideas that like turned out okay on plates, and I think those two kind of hone in with like me just being like, all right, this should work. Let's taste it. And then you taste it and you're like, oh no, that works. All right, we're good. So, and then next thing all these years later, the steak tartare was a Valentine's Day special a couple of years ago. And then it just ended up never leaving. And then, yeah, the French onion oyster was supposed to be a fall winter dish, and it's going on year 2 or 3 of the menu. And one of my mentors was like, that's a great idea. I'm stealing that. And that was whenever they say that, like, and that's the thing, like, frankly speaking, like that's what my Instagram is for these days. Like is twofold. It is to get people in the restaurant, and it is that my mentors see it, and if they say something nice, it's made my day. So, and that's one of those things where I'm like, all right, I did okay enough that one of these guys is like, all right, I'm gonna try that now. So,
as a person that's had, I think the last time I was at True Chesapeake, I had obviously the catfish sandwich, which is the Instagram was what pulled us in. I was like, what is that? And then I believe we had maybe the French onion oyster joint, and I think we toasted on it like jackasses. I was like, this is delicious. Let's do it. So yeah, it slaps. It's a hit. So the storytelling component you touched on there, and sort of this tradition of the being an oyster farm, having that background. So this sort of last question definitely pins everything together. So if you will, could you speak on sort of the balancing of like culinary trends? We have sort of these seasonal things. Everyone is trying sort of different things, and not everything lasts. And, sort of innovation and consistency, while also, ensuring like sort of the ethos is there, the roots are there.
100%. Yeah, the balance is the hardest thing, I think, really. You know, one of my biggest worries each season is that somebody's going to read the menu and not get it.
Yeah.
And you read a menu, and I like to think of each menu as a book, and the book is the story of the restaurant, and each dish is a chapter in the book. So making sure that it isn't disjointed, that it just reads and you're reading and you're like, yep, get it, get it. All right, nope, I understand this dude. Like, we get where this chef is coming from, and we understand the ethos of this restaurant, and that's the hardest part. And that really is where, like, I always, when I'm writing a menu, I'm writing on the menu. Like, each season, okay, where's the seasonal stuff that absolutely has to go? Pencil, cross them off, and then start going through and being like, all right, at the same time, we do have to have something for everybody. Is there enough vegetarian food? Is there enough seafood? Is there enough, gluten free? Is there enough, with the culinary trends going the way they are with health and everything else and dietary restrictions and all that stuff, you do have to think about these things. So it's definitely the hardest part, is making sure it's balanced and making sure there's something for everybody, but it's still telling the story and it makes sense and it reads well. And, I'm using the right amount of adjectives and sometimes not enough. It's just one of those things that I would say that's one of the hardest things for me. And I always try to, like, when I've got the menu to where I think where I want it, I'll actually print the thing out and I will obsess for several days. I'll put it down, walk away, pick it back up a day later, reread through the whole thing, just be like, does this make sense? Is there enough things for everybody? Are our staples still there? Does anything need to go away for a little bit? And then I do at the same time still have partners and investors that, I need to make sure that they're okay with everything that I'm doing at the same time, because, that's part of the industry. We're a business, we're a group of humans. I'm not going to just like be like, well, screw you guys, I'm going to do whatever I want. I want to make sure that they're happy with kind of the direction we're going in as well. So it's really a balancing act of like, am I happy with it? Are guests going to be happy with it? Are my chef friends walk in the door, am I going to be proud to put this in front of them? Because that's a big one. And then just, it is the balance everywhere. Is the food balanced? Are the people that I need to make happy balanced? It's all about balance. And it's really just a never ending goal to keep kind of one-upping ourselves every season. And if I'm trying to get a little bit better every year, if I'm trying to make a dish a little bit better every year, then I think I'm usually in a pretty good spot.
It's a great answer, and a great spot to kind of close on the real questions. So now I'm going to go into, in these final moments, two things I want to do. I want to do these rapid fire questions, and then we'll close up with shameless plugs. So rapid fire questions.
Yep.
Don't overthink these. So the first one goes like this: if you're having a bad day, and I know that industry is a wild industry at times,
Yep.
Who do you talk to? Who's the person you're like, yeah, it's sucked?
That's a good question. I usually keep my family out of it, honestly, because it's just one of those things. Like, I try to be like, I try to keep it to industry folk most of the time.
Sure.
It's one of those things that, like, it's nice to commiserate with people who get it and know where you're at. And so talking to chefs is really a good thing to kind of talk to each other and go through what's going on. I have several just dear friends that, like, I know I can show up at their bar when they're open and just be like, yo, I'm gonna have a bourbon and can I bend your ear for a second? I think that's one of those things that, like, it's nice for us, and I think that's why the chef community is so tight.
Yeah.
Because we all kind of came up through the hardships, we all came up through the grind, and especially the ones that have been doing this long enough. And there's such a core group of lovely humans all throughout this town that, I could not see one of these people for a year and we could pick up right where we left off, start talking about business, start talking shop, talking food,
Yeah.
I think that's kind of the thing around here, and that's the lovely thing about not only the industry in general, but Baltimore's food scene is that the fact that we all support each other, we all love each other, we're all fans of each other, and we can all kind of complain and just like walk away for a minute and be like,
Yeah.
like, let me tell you some stuff's going on. And then most chefs will be like, ha, I got something better. Let me tell you a story. And, it's just like a one up kind of situation. Be like, no, 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 I got you here. And then you walk away feeling better. So I think that's one of those things that's really lovely about this town and the food scene. And just like, just after being a chef in this town for 12 years now, it's just lovely to have that support.
So here's the next one. Thank you. That's good. And I've encountered that from my little perspective, sitting there, and I'll have a chef pop over that I know. It's like, hey man, how's it going? I was like, here's the thing. Everything sucks, and here's why. What you running into? It gets real. It gets real crazy.
100%. 100%.
So this one is a spicier question, but kind of funny. I remember when pawpaws and ramps showed up on everyone's menu. A lot of people didn't know what the hell they were doing when they were using them. And I think in an industry of uniqueness and parity, that's the way I kind of look at the culinary industry. What's the local ingredient that you think is going to show up on menus in the near future? Because I don't see many pawpaws. I still see ramps, but I don't see many pawpaws on people's menus these days. And that was all the craze a couple years ago.
Yeah, I actually I would like to say that I was definitely one of those people on the pawpaw bandwagon. The fun thing is so I've been in my home for a lot of years, and about 5 years ago, I had a bunch of pawpaw trees that were grown up enough to start dropping pawpaws in the forest kind of behind my house, and I was like, oh, this is neat. Like there's pawpaws. And I just started bringing them to work. I mean, like, all right, what are we going to do? And so that is definitely one of those ones. And I just checked the other day and they're about that big right now. So, I mean, they usually come out in like August-ish. So I'll bet you'll see pawpaws on the menu this end of the summer more than you think. And I think that's one of those things that like I'm actually already thinking on because like it's such a like, I don't know. Like it's a weird flavor, it's a weird texture, but some people dig it, some people don't like it at all.
Yeah.
So it's like, all right, well, there's like, yeah, I think I made a sorbet the first year, and frankly speaking, I think nowadays that was kind of a cop out. But like I needed to do something. They were getting overripe, and I needed to go. So I was like, all right, I got nothing. So like we're gonna make a sorbet, and that'll be good. But now I'm already like thinking. It's like, how do I what do I do? And I've got a couple ideas in my head, and and there's even like a savory element. Like I kind of want to like, I don't know, like if I can ceviche something in pawpaw, that'd be kind of neat. But like then finding a way to balance that out because there is a very tropical flavor to it.
Yeah.
So those are definitely things that are kind of running through my brain at the moment. And then, I haven't seen any crazy ingredients in a couple years. What was the one that's been coming out every now and then? It was the walking onion. It was the onions with these huge stems coming out. You can eat the whole thing, the stem, the onion. And I still haven't got into that. I meant to get some last year and it didn't happen. So I'm gonna have to double check or reach out to some people because I haven't even thought of that ingredient since until we just had this conversation. So that's something I'll have to be like, I'm gonna have to Google again and be like, when does that come out and when was that again? So, and all chefs and allium is a thing. Like we're just, it's just a weird thing with us. Is like I've got a chive blossom tattooed on the back of my leg. Like it's one of those things. Like I think every chef has an allium obsession in some way, shape, or form. I'm cooking with garlic scapes right now. A lot of people don't like them because they don't know what to do with them, and I really love them, so I cook with them a good bit. That's kind of that next ramp. It always goes ramp into garlic scape, so to me, it's like a natural progression. I think besides that, it's one of those things that every year it's just certain chefs look forward to certain things. Like for me, it's I can never wait until tomato and corn season hit. Like it's just tomatoes and corn in Maryland. It's just like it's such a Maryland summer thing that like I can remember having all the way growing up, and the fact that farmers are growing this stuff better every year, just like chefs are trying to get better at their job. So it's like all of a sudden tomatoes come out, and it's just like such a lovely thing. And so yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with that.
I mean, if you really want to impress upon your whimsy, as you were describing with your whimsy aesthetic, you can have like a walking onion soup or something. It'd be amazing.
100%, 100%. And I remember being like, all right, well, maybe I'll like, because I always try to have like an interesting mignonette on the menu, because
Yeah.
obviously we want to showcase our raw oysters. And I was always taught to never just do anything. So like just putting a mignonette on the menu to me is
Hmm.
like that's not what I do. So like let's make sure that, and I always try to make sure that there's like seasonal produce kind of involved in it. So walking onion mignonette is definitely something that's like in my brain now. So that's definitely, again, like right once I get out of service tonight, there's some research that's going to be had.
Load Evernote. So here's the last two. And I think they're both pretty quick. This first one. What was the last thing you ate?
Shoot, I forget to eat all the time. What is the last thing I ate? Oh, I had it's gonna make you sound like such a jerk. I had banchan leftovers last night, cold banchan wings. And yeah, I was in a lazy mode on my day off, and banchan is a go-to.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I joke on occasion. I was like, "It's like, so what did you eat?" I was like, "I had two protein shakes. I'm a degenerate. That's what it is."
No, and that's the thing. When you work with food so much, like, and chefs talk about this all the time, like we forget to eat. Like because we're walking around, we're like, peering over cooks, we're tasting little things here and there, and the next thing you know, you're like, oh crap, I didn't eat today.
Right.
So it's at one point food, like you forget food is sustenance, and you see it as like a job, and sometimes you forget. So, and that's what who was it? I was doing an event at Marta with Matt Edding, and Baltimore Banner was hosting it, and John Williams asked me a similar question, but he was like, what's your guilty pleasure? I was like, I miss Boston Market, and I have Boston Market frozen meals in my freezer at all times, because like I used to have a Boston Market that I could get food from, and now they're like most of them are closed, and I don't know where one is anymore. And so like that's something that I dearly miss, and feel like that should come back. I feel like that should be a thing. Maybe
Look,
I'll open a Boston Market restaurant next.
look. I would go there. I would get the meal. It would be the cornbread and the meatloaf. There's no
Yeah.
games here. That was the go-to.
No,
They had one in
no,
town.
100%. 100%. I mean, the mac and cheese was like watery, but it was delicious at the same time. Like their potato puree was good, like gravy was good. Like it just, that was good food.
So here's the last one. Since it's, this is for Culinary Arts Month, and, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask, you don't have to go too in depth in it, but if there was one tip that you would share with a home cook, like, how can I move from being like, cook -1? I recently watched Godzilla -1, so I'm making that reference. But what would be being cook -1 to being just a zero cook? What would be the one tip you would share that helps someone just become a better home cook? Is it like
Oh,
smoked your eggs?
yeah, that's a good question. I would say the one thing that I find with cooks is they're a little worried about seasoning. Like I think like seasoning start to finish tends to be something, like if you're making a soup or you're making a sauce or anything. I think people get nervous about salt a little more than they should. And that was something that dates back to culinary school. I had nothing but old French dudes teaching me, and they always were like, the majority of the United States under seasons their food. And once we started like working with that, when I started learning that, I was like, oh, all right, yeah, I think I was probably under seasoning too. So I think salt goes a long way, and then just finding balance in things, like playing with different vinegars and like acids or something, that like that's how I came up. I'm not a spice guy really. I'm more of a fresh herb and acid human being. Like I like to cook with fresh herbs and different kind of acids. So lemon juice goes a long way with a million different things, and I keep lemons in my fridge at all times because of that. But also like playing with different vinegars. There's a lot of fun companies out there making really fun stuff these days. So like a little bit of vinegar and darn near anything wakes it up. So like just really playing with like a balance of salt and acid So there was what was that show and that book, Salt, Fat, Acid, Heat.
Yeah.
That I really dug both the book and the documentary, and I think that's kind of those kind of things are what I would say for a home cook, to like really find those balances in flavors when they're playing with things, and even recipes that they read. You can see a great recipe, and from a home cook standpoint, you're not going to be able to read it like I read it, where I'm like I get that, but like I'm gonna tweak it a little bit here or there, or like if I'm gonna make it my own or whatever, what have you. But like still like taste something that you made and be like, well, what's missing? And like just always be kind of thoughtful of that. And most of the time it's salt or it's acid or it's something along those lines that just hasn't really balanced out the dish.
That's great. I completely agree on it because I can tell from firsthand experience, definitely with the vinegar piece, and cooking a lot more at home. And, the documentary as well, watch that. And yeah, definitely all of it. And even I may have gotten a small little lesson in the kitchen from Chris, as far as going through that whole process. So yeah, 100%. And so that's kind of it for the podcast. So there are two things I want to close out on. One, I want to thank you for spending some time with me, coming on and talking shop, if you will. And two, I want to invite and encourage you to share with the listeners the social media, website, all of that good stuff where folks can check out you, True Chesapeake, all of that good stuff. The floor is yours.
Appreciate it. Well, first and foremost, just thank you. This is it's to be back on a second time is really a pleasure, and I'm just thankful that you would even think of me to do this. So thank you. You're the man. Yeah, and your podcast is awesome, and it really. I remember looking back at my first one and listening to it, and I hate listening or watching myself on TV or this or that, but I do it just to make sure I don't say anything stupid. And then. But I remember listening through it. I was like, wow, he's good. Like, just so thank you. Like, really, like, you just like truly. And let's see, selfless plugs. True Chesapeake Oyster Company. Our restaurant is in Camden, but we're down the hill. We're on the Jones Falls. So we're a little tucked away, but give us a Google and it'll tell you where we're at. Our website is truechesapeake.com. Instagram at True Chesapeake, Instagram at Chef Zach Mills, Zach with a K. A lot of people spell my name with an H. Yeah, I really think that's it. We've got our patio is open. We are for your listeners who have not been to our restaurant. We are in the dead center of Baltimore City. If you look at a map, and you cannot tell we're in the dead center of Baltimore City. We're right on the Jones Falls. There's foliage. There's wildlife. It's pretty neat. So we're super thankful for our spot, and we hope everybody comes and checks it out.
And there you have it, folks. I want to again thank Chef Zach Mills from True Chesapeake Oyster Co. for coming on to the podcast. And I'm Rob Lee, saying that there's art, culture, and community in and around your neck of the woods. You've just got to look for it.